Shalom Devarim Chazon. And each year when we have the shir here at OTL, Baruch Hashem, it seems we're never in the same OTL, but each year when we're here, we say next year we should be in Yerushalayim. But unfortunately, once again, we're here in the 9 days, we're past Rosh Chodesh Av, and we're still here in Golus. We still don't have a Beis HaMikdash, and it's very disappointing. Just want to let everybody know another piece of information before we get into tonight's shir, that this week, Zion Av is the yahrzeit, the 23rd yahrzeit of the Nesivos Shalom. And I, personally, I had the good fortune to meet the Nesivos Shalom. The only time in my life I met the Nesivos Shalom was a few months before he was nifter. I was in Eretz Yisrael, and somebody encouraged me to go in and see the Nesivos Shalom. I was very, very taken. Besides, he looked like a malach. It was just a beautiful experience to be there. And anyone who learns through the Nesivos Shalom Svarim knows how encouraging, how uplifting, how beautiful the Svarim are. And after that, it rolled. I started saying the shir on Shabbos, and then we started doing the Thursday night shir. And here we are, Baruch Hashem, in our 14th year. And this week, someone from the Moistus Nesivos Shalom in Eretz Yisrael came to my office, and he said, I want you to know that we know about this shir that's going on here in Lakewood, and we know that there's a Nesivos Shalom shir that Baruch Hashem rolling almost 700 straight weeks. And he said, I want to give you something, and it's something that I'm going to share with everybody else here tonight when we're done. He sent me a link with an attachment that anybody here, I'm going to send it out with the shir tonight, that anybody here could send in their names, people in their family, and they are going to take all these names and go be mispalel by the Nesivos Shalom on Zion Av, which is on Tuesday, Emir Hashem. And the Nesivos Shalom is buried on Har HaZeisim. It's a big schus to daven by his kever. I try to go there every time I'm in Eretz Yisrael. And everybody is encouraged to send in your names, send in the kvittel, and they're going to accept it. They're going to know that it's from our shir. And remember, just when you send that every one of you is someone who listens to and comes to a Nesivos Shalom shir. There's nothing like doing something for the neshama of a tzaddik as learning his Torah. I don't know if there's anything better you could do. And it's brought down from the Oyev Yisrael, from the Abder Rav, Zechusi Yogan Aleinu, and he says something very interesting about Shabbos Chazon. He says, Shabbos Chazon is Shabbos HaGodol B'Yoser B'Mayla. That there's no greater Shabbos than Shabbos Chazon. And although during this time of the year we're down, but the Abder Rav tells us that there's no greater Shabbos more than any other Shabbos of the year. This Shabbos teaches us, and it shows us, that right in the middle of the darkest time, when we're mourning the Churban and we're thinking about the Churban Beis HaMikdash, when we're in the middle of the time at the Bein HaMitzorim, we have this Shabbos Chazon, this vision. It shows us that no matter what happens in history, that no matter what we do and no matter what transpires, this Haftarah this week of Shabbos Chazon reminds us that we are always and still and will always remain the children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we've pointed out at other times that although the Haftarah of this week tells us that we were corrupt as a nation, but just remember and look that it says when it talks about that we're corrupt, we use the terminology of banim. Banim ashchisim. You're still children. And there's no more encouraging thing for a yid to know that no matter where you are, no matter what you've done, no matter where you've been, you're still a child of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves you, and He wants you back. And even when we do Averos, Chas v'Shalom, we never, ever lose that. And especially on Shabbos Kodesh, when it comes to Shabbos, where there's only, as the Nesivos Shalom says always, on Shabbos there's always a Hava and the Vekis. On Shabbos, there's no Averos and there's no Churban. We move away from that when it comes to Shabbos. And that Avelos is only for Yemoi Sachol. And that makes the Shabbos even more special. The fact that Shabbos Chazon is taka on Shabbos, that this Shabbos has the great vision and the message that we said, that despite everything, we remain the children of Hashem. And the message too is that Shabbos will always be there for us and to remind us who we are and what we are, even during the most trying times of the year and the most trying times of our life. Shabbos acts as an oasis of hope and tranquility, that we move away from our life of the weekdays when it comes to Shabbos. It's brought down from the Ariya Kodesh. There's a lot of talk about this year. It doesn't fall out that way. When Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, when Tisha B'Av falls out on Motzei Shabbos, this year it's not that way. But it's brought down from the Ariya Kodesh that one never saw any sign of Avelus on the Ariya Kodesh on this Shabbos. On this Shabbos, it's Shabbos Kodesh. The Medrash, Bereshis Rabbah Chav Beis, tells us something fascinating. That after Cain killed Hevel, Adam HaRishon meets Cain. I don't know, we're about to say he met him in the street. I don't think there were any streets then, but he met Cain. And he says to Cain, his son, what's going to be with you? What's going to happen now? You killed your brother. What's going to be? And listen to this amazing answer that Cain gave to his father, to Adam HaRishon. Cain says, you know what? Adam HaRishon, you're asking me what my judgment is going to be. He says, I want to tell you something. He says, I did tshuva. I want you to know that I did tshuva. And I worked things out. I made a pshara with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I did tshuva. You don't have to worry. I worked it out. Adam HaRishon cannot believe he hears such a thing. What do you mean? A person can go ahead and kill somebody? And he makes a deal, makes a pshara with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and everything is forgiven, everything's forgotten. So Adam HaRishon, he heard this. He said, this is what tshuva could do. What a fascinating thing. This is what tshuva is. Adam HaRishon stood up right away, and the Medrash tells us that Adam HaRishon said, Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. That's what Adam HaRishon said. So first of all, the question is, well, what is this pshara? What is this working out deals, working out compromises with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? That's question number one. And also, when Adam HaRishon heard this fascinating thing about tshuva, he says, Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. What does anything have to do with Shabbos? What does tshuva have to do with Shabbos? So Nesivos Shalom explains that Cain was told by HaKadosh Baruch Hu that his punishment would be that he would have to wander the earth. He would have to wander, he'd go into Golus, so to speak, he'd have to wander the earth. At the same time, though, Hashem told Cain, Vayosem Hashem leKain ois. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Cain a sign. And the Medrash says that this ois, this sign, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Cain that he had to travel the world, he gave him a sign too. This sign that he gave to Cain was Shabbos. And what was the sign? What is the sign? The sign was that on Shabbos, you go back to your place. You have to wander the world the whole week. That's your judgment. But on Shabbos, you go back to who you were. You go back to your place. And that is the pshara, that's the compromise that Cain worked out with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That yes, Hashem, you're giving me my judgment, Cain said. I have to wander, but on Shabbos, you don't have to. Shabbos, you go back to being who you are, to who you're supposed to be. And that's the pshara. That's what Cain meant. We worked out some kind of deal. That Cain worked it out, and during the week he wanders, Shabbos not. So when Adam heard that tremendous thing, that Cain was able to work out such a deal, that on Shabbos nothing applies, on Shabbos you go back to being who you are, now it makes a lot of sense. That even after a chait of killing his brother, you can go back to your place on Shabbos. So now it makes sense. It makes perfect sense that when Adam HaRishon heard that, he said, Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. How amazing Shabbos is. What kind of madrega where Shabbos can bring you. And this is what Shabbos has to do with this, the Chazon that we say on this Shabbos. The vision that Yeshayahu ben Amoy saw is this fact, like we just spoke about. This fact that we are children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in any matzav. And when it comes to Chazon, when it comes to Shabbos, there's a special Chazon that more so than ever, when it comes to Shabbos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is reminding us, Chazon Yishayo ben Amoitz, what are you? You may be corrupt, you may be mashchisim, but you're banim mashchisim. You're still children, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want us to ever forget that. Shimu shamayim v'azini eretz. That's what the Haftarah continues at the beginning of the Haftarah. Shimu shamayim v'azini eretz. Why? Ki Hashem diber. Ki Hashem diber is telling us that the Devar Hashem, that there's a pshara with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu never forgets us, and He always wants us. Ki Hashem diber. Diber means that the Devar Hashem is nitzchi. And you know what? Which Devar Hashem is nitzchi? Ohavti eschem amar Hashem. Hashem tells us that I love you before, I love you now, and I will always love you as a nation. We know that when the Goyim b'shas the Churban, the Goyim went into the Beis HaMikdash, and they went into the Heichal. Chazal tell us that when they went into the Heichal, they saw the Keruvim were embracing each other. And we know, it's well known, that when the Klal Yisrael is doing the Ratzon Hashem, then the Keruvim were embracing each other. But when at times when Chas v'Sholom they weren't, so the Keruvim were not that way. But yet, b'shas ha'churban, the Goyim went into the Heichal, they went into the Beis HaMikdash, they saw the Keruvim were embracing each other. Can you imagine, at the time of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, there should be a symbolism of the Keruvim embracing each other. What's going on here? The message, Chazal tell us, and the Nesivos Shalom talks about it a lot, the message there is that even at the lowest point for Klal Yisrael ever, it's dafka at that time, when things are normal, when things are regular, so there will be times that the Keruvim are embracing, and there will be times that they're not. But when we need HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we're really down and out, and there was a Churban, then it's emergency crisis time. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to show us, right then, the Keruvim are embracing each other. He has to show us the love for Klal Yisrael, that we should never forget about that. And the message is the Mila of this Shabbos. And this is what we have to think of. Yesterday, I met somebody, one of the old-time Lakewooders. He says, what are you saying in Yeshir tomorrow night? So I started talking to him a little about Shabbos Chazon, this, that. He tells me, I want to tell you something. It's one line. He said, this is what I live with always. He says, I don't know what you're going to do Shabbos Nachamu. He's an old-timer, so he's going to have a free concert. He asked me, you're going to this concert, that concert, the mountain. I don't know, I'm not going to any concert, But he said, here's the line. If you want to celebrate Shabbos Nachamu, you have to celebrate Shabbos Chazon. You have to understand that the joy next week and the consolation and the double consolation, maybe we'll talk about it next week, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, when Hashem consoles us. But it's Kol HaMisabel al Yerushalayim. It's if you're Misabel for Yerushalayim. If you are, then Zoicha Baroya, then you can see B'Simchasa V'Nechemasa, then you'll be from the people who are Zoicha to see. And that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to see from us. He wants to see from us that we're not in cruise control. He wants to see for us that we care about this. It has to bother us. Not everybody's on the Madriga to sit down. Rabbi Victor Miller talks a lot about to sit down for a minute on the floor before you go to sleep. And he says, just make sure your wife is asleep before she sees you. You should call Rabbi Kassir, and you have a problem. Maybe you deal with guys. And he says that if it's the wife sitting on the floor for a minute, make sure the husband's asleep. He says, but that's just that we should be conscious. We should be aware that there was a Churban. It's almost 2,000 years, and we haven't fixed the problem. The Sinas Chinam is still there. The Lashon Hara is still there. It's all there, and every time when it's not built, we're destroying the Beis HaMikdash. Let HaKadosh Baruch Hu see that we care, but at the same time, let's understand that the Shabbos is special. Hashem is showing us through it all, I still love you, and that's a lesson we should never, ever forget, the lesson of Shabbos Chazon.